Hello, sei Charata. If I could give you one friendly advice that could change your life instantly, I would say stop complaining and start acting. May seem like simple advice, but if you really try to put it into practice, you will see how difficult it is to go a whole day without complaining. A lot of people fail to stop complaining, and the main reason for not being able to stop grumbling is that most people just try to eliminate the bad habit of complaining. And just eliminating the habit of complaining is no use, because it is necessary to replace the unwanted habit with another, better behavior. No matter how hard people try to stop complaining, life will continue to present different sorts of situations, and many of these situations can be unpleasant. If someone has committed themselves solely to not complaining, what happens? They end up suffering because they're forcing themselves to keep quiet. They start to feel more and more unsatisfied until they reach breaking point and their habit of complaining comes back in full force. So, the secret to minimizing the complaints is to substitute the undesirable behavior for something else. You must swap the habit of complaining with the habit of acting. With this simple change of focus, you stop focusing on what is wrong, you focus on a solution. You begin to direct your attention to what you really want, and this will change your reality. Your focus determines your reality. Have you ever noticed when you focus on something, you start to see it everywhere? For example, you're thinking about buying a new car, and you already chose the model of the new car you want to buy. And suddenly, it will seem like everywhere you look, you can see that car around you. Now, did everyone suddenly decide to buy the same car as you? Of course not. It's not that there's more of this car on the road. It is your focus that has changed. And as your attention is directed to that car model, you begin to notice it even more, even though it has always been there. This phenomenon has a name. It is reticular formation. It is a part of the brain that differentiates relevant stimuli from irrelevant stimuli. Well, what do we mean by stimuli? Is that our reality is rich in stimuli. There are different sounds and smells and people and movements around us all the time. Our brain chooses to focus on some of these stimuli and ignore others. And that is why, for example, you're able to talk to someone else in a noisy environment. Why is this concept of selective focus important for us to understand? It is that when you complain, you're negatively influencing your reality. When you complain, your selective focus is directed to the wrong place. Your focus is on what is missing, what is problematic, what you don't like. And focusing on complaining will only allow you to experience what you're complaining about. It's just like the example of the car. You start to see it everywhere. This happens, for example, to people who obsess over politics. They spend the whole time arguing with those who have a different point of view, a different political point of view. Everywhere they look, they see those things that they don't agree with. They're always blaming their political enemies. This can start to get pathological to the point that it becomes impossible to have a conversation for longer than 5 minutes with that person without them starting to go on about politics again. Now, why do they do that? Let's use a little bit of empathy to understand the perspective of others. That boring person who just keeps complaining, they believe that they can only improve the situation by complaining. If I don't complain, things don't improve. Yeah. If you ask someone to stop complaining, the first objection you're gonna hear is this one. Yeah, but if I don't complain, nothing will improve. Is that true? Or is that just a false belief? When we come across something that we would like to change, the only way to improve the situation is by acting upon it. The only thing is that acting requires work. So instead of acting, we just complain. By having this false belief, we fool ourselves into thinking that We are acting, and our complaints won't change anything unless they are accompanied by action without a sincere intention to implement actions. Complaining is just a kind of an outburst, a whimper, a cry whose only practical effect is a sense of momentary relief. When we complain, we may have the false impression that we're doing something to change reality, but the reality will remain the same because that claim alone is devoid of action. We must act, not just complain. Perfectly understand the anguish of the person who, because they don't see other alternatives, they believe that they have to complain to improve things. Everyone ends up doing this over and over again. But the truth is that things will only improve from positive actions, from constructive attitudes that are led by people who are not just complaining, by people who make change happen. Now, what about you? Are you a complainer? Are you a doer? Imagine people being divided in two groups. Those who, let's say, they complain more than they act, and those who act more than complain. Which group would you want to join? The group of people that complain, or the group of people that carry out the actions they need to? Perhaps you have the impression that you're part of the group of people who act more than they complain. But please take a minute to think whether this is a false impression or if this is really true. And for you to approach the truth, it is necessary to make an honest self-assessment of our behavior. So here are 4 ways you can assess yourself. First question would be, think about the last 7 days. How many conversations did you have with your relatives and friends and co-workers in which the main theme was some sort of complaint? And in those 7 days, how many concrete and specific actions did you take to resolve the issues that were bothering you? Another way would be to take a look at your social networks. Take a look at how many messages you've been writing about, complaining about things. Now take a look at how many messages you are sharing solutions, where you're writing solutions for those problems. Number 3 would be to increase your awareness, to evaluate the conversations you have with yourself in your head. Is your mind usually satisfied, thinking about things you're grateful for? Or do you just complain and you focus on what you can't do? And the 4th question will be, how much of your time do you dedicate to your complaints, and how much of your time do you dedicate acting to improve the subject of your complaints? And when we begin to ask these objective questions, it becomes more clear which group of people do we belong to. There is no such thing as someone who only complains or someone who is always in action without ever complaining. What matters here is what you do most of the time. What matters is whether the standard state of your mind is action or complaint. A common confusion is what it means to complain, what it means to act. For example, a coworker interrupts you constantly. You need to talk directly to that coworker and make the request of not being interrupted. When you ask your colleague to change his or her behavior, you're not complaining, you're acting. Now, if you complain about the behavior of your coworker to me or to your neighbor, that is not acting. That is just complaining. Just complaining is not acting. That is a false idea. This is also reinforced through by social validation. Complaining is contagious. There is a common game in social relations, the game of who can complain the most. I'll give you an example of how it works. Probably already played it. You go back to the previous example, you have a coworker, super annoying, really gets on my nerves. But I don't ask him or her to change their behavior. So I don't act. Instead of that, I go to my neighbor and say something like, oh, you have no idea what happened to me today at the office. Blah, 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 blah. I spent 10 minutes complaining about my coworker being a very inconvenient person. And after I finish my complaining monologue, my friends will agree, hey, oh, that is ridiculous. That's absurd. Oh, gosh, how can you do that? They validate my complaint. And now this is when the complaint relay begins. As soon as everyone finishes agreeing to my story, there is an exchange taking place, as if the person understands, oh, wow, great, now it's my turn to complain. And they go say, you think that is bad? Just wait to hear what just happened to me today. It was outrageous, blah, 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 blah. And then this relay continues, always with one person complaining, other people validating, and then it changes. There are many circles and friendships. The only thing that actually unites these people is just this game of complaining. And what is worse, if you try to break this vicious cycle, you get scolded by the group. How ironic. You suggest to stop complaining, and then they complain. It is a violation of the social norm of that particular group. The reason is that the dynamics of this type of relationship involves relaying the complaints, not solutions, complaints. That's why we're together here talking about how important it is to stop complaining. Stop complaining. Start acting. With everything we've talked here so far, you've already understood that you don't want to waste your focus on actions and ideas that you have no control over. You want to stop complaining? Want to start acting? Well, if so, it is critical that you develop the ability to understand the difference between what you control and what you can't control. In relation to things you can't control, you must be mature enough to accept reality as it is. As for the things you have some control over, you have the responsibility to stop complaining, to roll up your sleeves and start acting to change the situation. If you can do something about it, well, instead of sitting around and grumbling, do something to change what needs to be changed. Take responsibility. Make it happen. The world is already filled with people who just complain. What the world desperately needs, what the world is lacking, is people who are willing to get their hands dirty and solve problems. So stop playing the victim. Stop being a reactive person. Take on the role of protagonist and put yourself in control of your own life. This is personal development. This is maturity. It is getting rid of attachment and fear and victimization. How will you use your time from now on? How can you move from the group of people who complain about everything to the group of people who act? It is simple. Take more time for action than you take for complaint. And when you realize that you're wanting to complain about something, ask yourself, what can be done to improve? What are the alternatives? How can I contribute with a solution? How can I create something that will make reality better? Who should I call? What should I say to them? This is a much more positive and healthy focus. Try to go a whole week without complaining. 1 week without saying you can't do this, that you don't like that you don't know how to do something. Even mentally complaining. Stop for a few seconds. Take a breath and realize that you can rephrase your sentence. Instead of saying that you hate this, you hate that, say what you prefer. Focus on the positive rather than on the negative. Say that you intend to do something about it and replace that complaint with action. Whenever you complain, write down the complaint. After a few days, read your notes. Choose one of your complaints. Start thinking about solutions to solve this. And once you stop complaining, you begin to live with more abundance in your life. Your actions become oriented toward a better future, a better life. Now you feel that you are beginning to be in control of your own life. Stopping complaining and starting to act is a change of attitude that can transform your life in a very short time. With this new attitude, you can immediately stop being a fragile and reactive person and become someone strong, someone proactive, someone who knows that you are on the right track, even in the face of unwanted situations right now, but you know that you're doing what needs to be done. You will never reach a time when everything in your life is perfect. Life is full of challenges and pains and frustrations. Wanting to eliminate all this is something absolutely out of our control, beyond us. But the way we look at the problem, the life's problems, that depends on us. You can develop yourself as a person and choose to be greater than these problems. And to learn how to do this, following the orientation of our personal development course, I invite you to attend a special class on how to achieve improvements in your life. Starting with yourself, you can click in arata.se/personal development.